So I've never made it a secret that I like making money. And recently I've noticed that some YouTubers get a whoopload of views by ranking historical figures in a tier list, based on some arbitrary metrics such as how successful they were. Now I think this is completely stupid, but hey, I want my YouTube views. So I'm gonna do it. In this video I've put together a list of pirate captains, and I'll rank them based on how successful I consider them. But what does successful mean? Whatever I feel like at the moment. Of course, there were a lot of pirate captains active in the field that I cover, that being European colonial sea roving in the 1630 to 1730 timeframe. So I can't be bothered to cover literally all of them, which is impossible anyway since there's just so many. So I'll just cover the ones I thought would be interesting to talk about. This will be an opportunity for me to talk about some less known but interesting captains, and for you to learn about them. So let's get into it. Ah yes, and here we have it, the funny tier list. So here at the bottom I have the pictures that represent the various captains. Let's start out with the most recognizable part of all time, that being Blackbeard, of course, or his real name, Edward Teach. Now a lot of people say Thatch, and his family spelled it Thacche, so Thatche, but it was most likely pronounced Teach. You can watch my interview with Bayless Brooks about this. So the thing with Blackbeard is that he saw an incredible rise to power. He started out with only a sloop, which is a pretty small vessel, which then grew into a group of sloops, and suddenly he commanded a powerful, full-rigged ship, and the largest group of pirates in the Caribbean. The thing was that he was never really able to do anything with this potential. He never seized any considerable prizes or a significant amount of money. His most notable feat was blockading the port of Charleston, but from this he only extracted a chest of medicines, a little bit of money, and some stolen clothes. A few days later his ship sank, and he was back to square one. Of course, it seems like he had retired in relative comfort, before he was illegally assassinated by a neighboring state. So Blackbeard wasn't that successful, and his career didn't last very long, but he definitely raised a lot of hell, and pissed off a lot of people, and grew very powerful. So I think at least he deserves to get in the middle, so I'll place him in the B tier. Next up we probably have a fan favorite, that being Stede Bonnet. I know he's the star of some recent TV series. I think it's called Our Flag Means Death, I think it's called. So I'll probably feature him in the thumbnail or something just to get more clicks. But yeah, let's cut right to the chase. Stede was definitely not successful. He only became a captain because he had the means to just build his own ship and hire the crew, rather than any sort of experience or merit. At multiple occasions he just blustered into engagements that almost got him killed, and he was somehow able to escape each time. However, I do think that people give Stede a bit too much of a hard time. For one, it wasn't unreasonable for an aristocrat to turn pirate. Blackbeard was a plantation owner, for example. Stede also had pirate ancestors. He wasn't that stupid either. For one, he managed to evade the law on multiple occasions and escaped from them several times. And his most notable feat was maintaining a relatively successful hit-and-run blockade on Charleston. But his career was short and ended in his death, and he did a lot of mistakes, so I'm not gonna put him in the bottom because that's reserved for a certain other pirate, but I'll give him, he'll just scrape the edge on the C here. The sea, get it? The bottom of the sea, more like. Yeah, let's go to Bartholomew Roberts. He's generally recognized as the greatest pirate of all time, but I disagree if you've seen my video series on him. Firstly, he's said to have captured 470 ships, but more than half of those were small, unarmed fishing boats. His most valuable prize was a Portuguese treasure ship, which he then lost without taking any money from it. His career was rather long for a pirate of this era, 3 years, but he still died at the end of it. So yeah, pretty overrated, but by no means an unsuccessful pirate. I mean, he still did a lot of stuff, and I think he's deserving of... Yeah, I'm not gonna put him in S, that's reserved for like the gold standard, but he'll get an A. But not, there's gonna be some people who supersede him. Speaking of which, next up is Robert's mentor, Howell Davis. His career lasted only a year, but during this time he captured around 100 ships. So if he had gotten as many years as Roberts, he likely would have fared better. Davis was also a great tactician and innovated tactics which Robert would go on to use. The tactic which I'm speaking of is called vaporing, which is where pirates, they hoist their black flag, they start dancing around, they get drunk, they start dancing, and they play a lot of music and like beat the drums and play the flutes and everything to just make as much noise and scare people into submission. And both Davis and Robert's favorite tactics, like they just sailed into an area, just started vaporing, scaring people, like they also just surrendered instantly, so they didn't have to fight anything. Yeah. And Howell, of course, he was the one who invented this. And he was also more humane than Roberts and treated his victims very well. He was a good diplomat and great at using deception. He would often use disguises and say he was someone that he wasn't. And I definitely think he should get more attention. But I mean, that's theoretically he could have fared better than Roberts, but in practice he didn't, so I'll just land him just below. But yeah, he should get more attention. And next up we have my favorite pirate of all time, and that is of course Bartholomew Sharp. Sadly, I don't have any period illustrations of him, so I'll use one of my own illustrations of him, how I imagine him. But it's based on like a Chilean comic, where he like has this beard, but he doesn't have a hat. The hat's a different story. I mean, the thing with Bartholomew Sharp is that there's just so much period stuff written about this guy and his adventures. He wrote a journal himself, which tells us a lot about his personality. He definitely had his flaws. It's apparent in his writing that he was a bit cocky, and he liked himself quite a lot. He also loved competing over stuff like spearfishing, and he had a tendency to gamble with his own men. And rule number 1 for leadership: don't gamble for money with your own men. I mean, don't gamble at all with them. You're gonna make enemies, and yeah, Sharp did, and they mutineered against him. Now, many of them called Sharp a coward because he was very cautious, but it's apparent that he was one of the best tacticians of this era. He was just very good at improvising in hot situations, in bad situations. He was likewise an excellent navigator. He's the first Englishman to have sailed around Cape Horn from the east. However, whilst Sharp was very capable, he always had bad luck and never got rich. Though his pirate career lasted like 30 years or something, which is a lifetime more than Blackbeard or Roberts, so you gotta give him some kudos. And for that, and I mean, he just always loved what he was doing, and he did for a long while, so I gotta put him like on top of the A tier, but definitely not the S. S is for the very special ones. So yeah, Samuel Bellamy, it's this guy here. It's like the best picture I ever been released. He started out by pirating from a canoe, so like a little boat, and then he ended up with the largest pirate ship in the Caribbean, the With a Galley. And during the short duration of his career, I think it lasted only like a year, maybe 2. He was definitely the pirate rock star. Like, a lot of people just idolized him and thought he was the best. And he might have been one of the first pirates of the time to use the default Jolly Roger, you know, the skull and crossbones. Though he used several flags, I think he used one with a trumpet. He also assembled one of the largest pirate fortunes. Now, there exist some myths about him. It is often said that he liberated slaves, which isn't true. He took slaves as cargo and traded them, just like every other pirate. His crew called themselves Robin Hood's men, not because they would take from the rich and share with the poor, but because they wanted to live like the merry men of Sherwood Forest and just do whatever they want, meaning go to sleep whenever and just drink all the time. Anyway, yeah, good enough, but I'm not sure if he was better than Howell or Davis. Like, I think he was as good as Roberts. It's just that his career didn't last as long, and I'm not sure if he beat Howell either. Howell just did so much crazy stuff. I'll put him here on the bottom of the A for now. And next up we have this quite round gentleman, which is a pirate called Charles Swan. He's very obscure, but actually one of my favorites. He's sort of a mix between Stede Bonnet and Howell Davis. And there they are. And originally Swan was a merchant captain. And he was just sailing around in South America, just doing a little bit of trading. And then he realized he just wasn't making any money. And so he decided to turn pirate. He was kind of convinced by his crew also. So while he was just casually burning towns along the Pacific coast, he wrote letters back home, trying to convince his wife and his investors that he was actually doing the right thing, and they should get a pardon for him, since he was making more money now, they would also get more money. Well, his pirating wasn't going so good. So in the end, he ended up crossing the Pacific and ended up in the Philippines, where he pledged his allegiance to the Muslim Sultanate of Mindanao. His men soon, they didn't want to stay, so they mutineered against him, and he ended up as an officer under the Sultan. And after a while, he tired of this, and when he tried to escape the Sultan with some stolen money, he was tracked down and just killed. And funnily enough, we don't know what most pirates look like. They don't have any description or accurate illustrations of them. But Charles Swan actually has some decent eyewitness description. For one, like this picture shows, he was kind of fat, and he wore a red coat. But, I mean, despite his missteps, he was definitely a good diplomat. He was very intelligent, and I think he was definitely more capable than Stede Bonnet, especially in terms of diplomacy, but doesn't go on the tiers. Just doesn't go on the tiers Blackbeard. So I'll place him above Stede if I can do that. There we go. And here we have a sort of semi-famous pirate, at least if you know your pirates, and that's Henry Jennings. Sadly, he doesn't have any period illustrations either, and we don't know what he looked like. Though I always had like a strong vision of what he looks like, because he's such a unique character. So basically, Jennings was first hired by the governor of Port Royal to hunt pirates near the Spanish shipwrecks in Florida. Surprise! Jennings started looting the shipwrecks himself. Eventually, the British Crown kind of noticed that he was doing, and that it was actually piracy, and he was declared an outlaw. So Jennings escaped to New Providence Island, where a lot of pirates have set up a base, and he became the most powerful warlord in the era. But when royal pardons were issued, Jennings was one of the first to accept them, since he didn't really care about piracy. He never wanted to become a pirate. He always saw himself as a legal privateer. And neither did he really care for New Providence. He was kind of just a convenient place to spend his plunder and party. So he retired back to the comforts of his plantation, and during the next war he did some privateering, and he lived for quite a long while. So he had a decently long career. He took a fair bit of money. He was very powerful and actually survived. But piracy barely improved his economic standing. I mean, he was rich before he became a pirate and was rich when he retired. So I think it's deserving of, I don't know if it's an A or B. It's a pretty tricky one. I mean, we can adjust this, but for now I'll put him just under Sharp. Actually, maybe I should put him... I don't know, because like his pirate career wasn't that... we'll put him... Actually, I think I'll put him in the B, and I'll put him above Blackbeard. Yeah, I might adjust this later, we'll see. It's not like this really matters, this is autistic. Here we have a funny one. Another obscure pirate that I wanted to include as a sort of tribute to one of my Discord members. You'll know who you are, lad. I hope you're watching this. And that pirate is Diego de Melloto, also known as Diego Lucifer, and like 50 million other names. And it is possible that Diego went by multiple aliases, or that there were many different pirates named Diego and the nickname de Melloto. There were a lot of Diegos and there were a lot of Mellotos in the Caribbean. So he had been born into relative prosperity, but due to his mixed heritage, he was mistreated and turned to piracy as a way of revenge. He sailed with Spain's worst enemy at the time, the Dutch, during the 1630s. And if reports are to be believed, Diego's career lasted some 40 years. The last reports of him are from 1673. So what happened to him? I don't know. Did he die? Did he retire? Were the reports of the Diego de Melloto of the same person? Either way, it definitely seems like he managed to piss a lot of people off, which is always a plus in my book. So I'll get him a... Actually, I think his career lasted very long. He's kind of like Sharp, it's just that we don't know specifically what happened to him. So Sharp died in prison, that's kind of bad, but he also lived like a long life and bought a plantation and stuff. And we just don't know what happened to Diego, so he might have fared better, he might have fared worse, but I'll just put him below Sharp. There we go. And now we can move on to another familiar face, that being Charles Vayne. You might know him from some TV series or a video game, because he appears a lot, but in real life he wasn't that successful. His career spanned only a short while, he didn't amass any fortunes, and he was hanged in Port Royal. But the thing with Vayne is that he always went up against superior odds. And somehow always made it out alive. For example, when New Providence was taken over by royalist pirates, Vayne managed to capture the fort and the city. And when the navy then arrived to kick him out, Vayne somehow managed to escape by sending a fire ship at them and then just slipping out with a sloop. And then he survived a mutiny, he survived the storm and the shipwrecking, and almost escaped the capture, which eventually led to his death. I guess you could say he was lucky and unlucky at the same time, but there was certainly some tactical ability on display. So, then again, he never made any money, so I'm not sure if he should get C or B. He might get I think I'll put him in the bottom of B for now. Yeah, he's definitely more successful than these guys, but he doesn't even top Blackbeard. But they're very similar in some ways. Now we're gonna move across the world, very befittingly, because we're gonna talk about Thomas Tew. And I mean, I've covered a kind of a streak of failed pirates, and I'll promise I get into the S tier very soon. You might notice from the pictures. But first I want to cover Thomas Tew, because he's the prologue to the S tiers. And he's actually one of the most important figures in pirate history, because he invented the pirate round, which was a route where pirates traveled from America to Madagascar. And from Madagascar they plundered ships in the Red Sea and Indian Ocean, and then they returned home with a stink load of money. And Tew first undertook this long and dangerous voyage in only a sloop, which is quite remarkable, because it's a big ocean and a sloop is a small ship. And he managed to enrich his family and befriend powerful politicians in New York, including the governor. But on his second voyage, he was killed in the Red Sea. But, still, due to his innovation, success, and importance, I'd rank him pretty high. I'm not sure if I'd rank him above Sharp. Because he just... I'll just put him here. He did a good job. And yeah, while Tew wasn't able to fully capitalize from the pirate round, Henry Avery definitely was. So Avery started out as a ship's officer, and then he led his crew into mutiny and they became pirates. And aboard their warship, which they renamed the Fancy, he sailed to Madagascar, teamed up with Thomas Tew, and they captured a convoy of Mughal ships in the Red Sea, the biggest and richest one being the Ganges Sawai, or Gunsway. And the taking of the Gunsway was very brutal, and casualties were staggering on both sides. There was definitely a lot of blood, but the capture itself was one of the most profitable heists in history. And it caused a diplomatic crisis and sparked a global manhunt for Avery. But in the end, no one really knows what happened to him. It seems that he was able to just take his share of plunder and go underground. And his exploits made him a huge media icon and an inspiration for later pirates. There was plays that made about him and songs and stuff. And he was kind of the Jack Sparrow of his day. And yeah, he's got to get the top spot. He probably retired, captured one of the richest prizes of all time, commanded a large crew and ship. So yeah, top spot. For now, at least. We've still got 3 more pirates. And next up we have Edward England. And yeah, he's not getting the top spot. Now, England was one of those pirates that just idolized Avery. He named his own ship the Fancy after Avery's ship, and he teamed up with some other pirates that wanted to revive the pirate round. So they sailed to Madagascar, where they built a new base and began attacking ships in the Indian Ocean. So whilst Tew and Avery had attacked Muslim ships, these new roundsmen focused primarily on the European trading companies, so they attacked the forts and the ships and stuff. But England's problem wasn't that he was stupid or a bad tactician or a coward. It was that he was a really nice guy that sailed with very nasty people. He was the sort to keep women and children safe in his cabin, whilst the men were sort of hoisted slaves into the rigging and used them for target practice. So after a particularly gruesome battle where the pirates wanted to just execute the prisoners, England decided to release them. So the crew had enough, and they marooned him. Now, England actually managed to escape the island he was marooned on, and he ended up on Madagascar. And there he settled down and sustained himself on donations by pirates that felt sorry for him. And it's a pretty comfy retirement. He probably ate a lot of nice pineapples, provided they have pineapples on Madagascar. I hope they do, else I'm not going there. But it's not exactly a mark of success. Though I do think I'll place him higher than Vayne, but not higher than Blackbeard, actually. Because I do consider that Blackbeard's successful career and just ending up so famous is kind of more remarkable than retiring and having to leave on pirate neat bucks. And England's replacement was a guy called Richard Taylor. I don't have a picture of him. I kind of want to draw him at some point, but for now I'll use his flag. And I mean, he was pretty much England's opposite. Whereas England was kind of nice, and democratic. Taylor was dictatorial. He was a narcissist and a bully. But he also maintained an iron grip over his crew using both diplomacy and discipline. He would sometimes go down and just beat them up if they said something against him. And this shaped him into a surprisingly effective fighting and sailing force. Together with his consorts, he captured the richest prize in all of pirate history, the Nossa Senhora do Cabo. Her wealth even succeeded the Mughal convoy captured by Avery and the Gunsway. And impressively, Taylor was able to capture her without a fight, since the Nossa had been damaged in a storm. Now, Taylor stuck around for a bit before his company split up, and he sailed to the Americas. There he sold his ship to a Spanish governor in return for a pardon, and then he retired as a Spanish naval officer. I've also heard it said that he got married and used his money to buy a plantation. So yeah, Taylor, I mean, he started out as a regular sailor, and then he established a really disciplined pirate crew, an effective company. He took the richest prize in history without a fight, and then he retired successfully. So yeah, I mean, I gotta put him higher than Avery, actually. Like just the top of the list, the absolute gold standard. And it kind of looks nice as well with the flag there at the top. Yeah, and then now we're gonna round off with a bit of a meme, and that's being a very popular pirate called John Rackham. Now, this guy's of course super famous, and after Blackbeard, he's probably the most well-known pirate. Partly because of his colorful name, mostly because of his association with the two only known female pirates, or well, confirmed female pirates, Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Well, firstly, we don't even know if John was called Calico Jack. There's no, reliable source confirming it. Secondly, we don't know if he was actually Charles Vayne's quartermaster, as the popular story says. Thirdly, he didn't design that famous flag with the crossed swords. It's a modern invention and has never ever ever been corroborated by a period source. But hey, some of my viewers are really obsessed with these famous flags for some reason, and they will argue in the comments why it is historical. I mean, they're essentially the flat earthers of the pirate community. So what did John Rackham do if he didn't do all those things? Well, he did have an affair with a woman named Anne Bonny, and after the governor wanted to crack down on their adultery, no horny allowed, they stole a small sloop together and started robbing fishing boats. It's kind of romantic, but it's not badass by any means, like beating up poor fishermen. And he eventually got tracked down by the Navy, and he has surrendered after one shot was fired. Then he was taken to Port Royal, and he was hanged. And I mean, he's only famous because he had two women in his crew, which turned into a media sensation, because people thought it was really cool and different. So yeah, Jack will get the absolute bottom of the bilge, and he should stay there, along with anyone who likes his flag. And well, yeah, that's the list. It could have been way longer, and I probably missed out on your favorite pirate, Captain. I don't care. This isn't a serious listing by any means. It's just for fun, and so I can get some clicks. But if you want to, I'll make a second list in the future. There's more pirates, more interesting pirates, more fun pirates that we can talk about. I didn't mention William Kidd. I didn't mention a bunch of the Buccaneers. I'm trying to think of. I didn't mention a bunch of the pirates from the sort of early 1700s, between 1699 and 1710. I think one of them is called John Bowen, and those guys were pretty interesting as well. But yeah, I mean, if you want me to make a second list, just tell me in the comments if you like to see that, and well, we can work something out. Yeah. A mastodontic super mega thanks to my generous supporters over on Patreon: Cole Freer, Max Dweck, 1660, Michael Jantz, Flintlock, Rachel, Lockar, Dyer, and Ted11. If you want to support me monetarily, please check out the links to PayPal and Patreon in the description below. This is what helps me fund my research and make better videos. Otherwise, please give the video a like and a comment, so the algorithm will spread it to more potential viewers. And why not share it with a friend? Cheers.